Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settle in, and begin. I'd like to start by saying that I've always had an interest in the paranormal. Growing up, I loved scary stories, both reading and listening to them. So, it was a bit disappointing that I had never personally experienced anything truly unexplainable. Sure, I'd catch glimpses of things out of the corner of my eye, or feel uneasy in certain places, but I always assumed it was just my imagination. That changed when a series of unsettling events occurred. About 6 years ago, just before the pandemic began, I took a clerical job at my alma mater Center for Cultural Affairs. The department oversees 3 student-based cultural groups: a marching band, a chorale, and a dance troupe. Since the members were either part-time students or trainers, and our director was often tied up with other commitments, I usually found myself alone in the office. Our office was located far from the main university grounds, inside an old house that once served as a family residence during World War II. After the original owners moved abroad, the property was purchased by the university, which was still a young institution at the time. It was first converted into an elementary school in the 1960s. When that department moved to a new building on the main campus, the house sat vacant for over 10 years before it was renovated into a small museum, another part of our department's responsibilities. To give better context to what happened, let me describe the house's layout. It was a colonial-style 2-story wooden structure, complete with large windows circling both floors. The ground level housed the main hall, typically used for external exhibits, often rented by artists for solo shows. On the left side of the house was a doorway leading to a modest kitchen and dining area, which also had the restrooms. To the right, a wooden staircase led up to the second floor, where another exhibit space and our office were located. At the back of the upper floor was a door to an emergency staircase leading down and outside. During my first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. However, whenever I introduced myself to other university staff and mentioned where I worked, they would almost always ask if I had experienced anything yet. In the house, it wasn't just 1 or 2 people. It was nearly everyone. I found it odd, but since I hadn't encountered anything strange myself, I dismissed it and eventually forgot about it. That was until things began to change. My first strange experience happened about a month in. It was close to closing time and the sky had started to darken. I had just finished securing all the windows and doors and was heading out when I suddenly felt the need to use the restroom. I re-entered the house without turning on any lights, as there was still enough natural light to see. The bathroom had a very distinctive layout. When you opened the squeaky door, the toilet was directly in front, and the sink was to the right. I entered, locked the door out of habit, and turned to lift the toilet lid. When I turned back around to sit down, the door was wide open. Now, I need to emphasize, the door made such a loud creak that I could usually hear it open or close even from the second floor. But this time, there was complete silence. I was certain I had locked it, just as I've always done. But somehow, it was open. Startled, I nervously said aloud, can I just use the bathroom real quick? I promise I'll leave as soon as I'm done. I closed the door, quickly finished, and left the house in a hurry, too frightened to glance back. After that incident, odd things began to happen more often. I'd hear the old wooden floors creaking, as if someone else was walking around, even though I was alone. Occasionally, I'd hear footsteps coming up the stairs, only to find no one when I checked. One time, as I was sweeping, an old, heavy picture frame began to shake on its own. At first, I thought I may have brushed it accidentally, but considering how large and weighty it was, it seemed unlikely. I then wondered if there had been a minor earthquake, but none of the other frames in the hall moved. Just that one. But the most consistent and disturbing part was the feeling, one I could never shake, that I was never truly alone in that house. It always felt like someone or something was nearby, silently observing. Over time, I got used to it. I never saw anything directly, and I was never harmed. The strange occurrences weren't frequent enough to raise alarm, so I gradually learned to ignore them. That is, until something happened that truly terrified me. I should mention that a security guard was always stationed near the property's gate, just outside the house, but still within museum grounds. One day, feeling a bit bored, I went over to chat with the guard on duty, a kind woman in her late 50s with whom I got along well. During our conversation, she shared something that sent chills down my spine. As I mentioned, the house had large windows all around, and from the right angle, you could easily see inside from the ground. She told me that just the day before, while sitting at her post and writing in the logbook, she happened to glance up at the second floor and saw what she believed was me, wearing a white dress, walking from one window to another. She watched for less than a minute when she suddenly heard my voice coming from the ground floor. I was laughing while chatting with one of our part-time staff who had stopped by. She looked down, and there I was, clearly not in a white dress. I don't recall what I was wearing that day, but it definitely wasn't that. Shocked, she looked back up, but whoever she had seen was no longer there. She told me she instinctively made the sign of the cross and whispered a quick prayer. That moment shook me. For the next few days, I was constantly on edge, glancing over my shoulder. Thankfully, or perhaps luckily, COVID hit soon after, and we transitioned to remote work for months. When on-site operations resumed, I was reassigned to another department within the main campus. I haven't returned to that museum house since, and honestly, I don't plan to. Especially not after learning that whatever entity is there decided to take on my appearance. While my new workplace is far more populated, I've still had a few unsettling experiences there as well. But that's a story for another time. I had just turned 40 and was living what I considered a fairly healthy and active lifestyle. I ate well, exercised 5 days a week, and maintained a demanding schedule as a full-time hairstylist. Looking back now, I can see that the early signs of illness had already started to appear, although at the time I didn't recognize them for what they were. In the 5 years leading up to my 40th birthday, I experienced occasional symptoms like brief, sudden fevers, persistent mild headaches, and deep fatigue. I'd also get dizzy from time to time. But since these episodes seemed random, I assumed it was simply due to lack of rest or being overworked. Eventually, the symptoms began to affect my vision, and I started experiencing strange visual auras. Still, I didn't think it was anything serious. Then came early September 2010, a day I'll never forget. I woke up feeling unusually short of breath and had to sit at the edge of the bed just to gather the strength to stand. I was also lightheaded. After pushing through, I got myself ready for work, packed my grabbed my laptop and got in the car while my partner drove. During the drive, I apparently blacked out a few times, which alarmed my partner enough to take me straight to the emergency room. Once we arrived at the ER, I was admitted immediately. My heart rate was extremely high. I was dizzy, exhausted, and apparently had a grayish tone to my skin. They took me straight into an exam room to wait for a doctor. At that point, my partner left to run errands. I waited for some time until a doctor came in. I still remember him vividly. He was a man of African descent, about 5'9", in his mid-40s, wearing large, shiny, gold-rimmed glasses that reminded me of 1970s fashion. I even wondered whether that style had come back in. The glasses were so reflective they sparkled. Despite how ill I felt, my mind was still clear. It wasn't a hallucination. He examined me, and I was surprised at how cold his hands were. He went through the typical medical checks and told me not to worry, that I would be fine. Then he left, and I never saw him again. I was admitted to the hospital and stayed there for nearly 2 months before finally being diagnosed with a rare form of B-cell lymphoma. It was stage 4, and only about 2% of those diagnosed with this form survive. I underwent 3 rounds of chemotherapy by late December, shortly after Christmas, but the treatments weren't effective. Tumors had started to develop in my abdomen. My oncologist decided to try a more aggressive form of chemotherapy with a much higher dose. The first session of this intensified treatment left me unable to feel my legs, arms, or hands. I couldn't walk without help or a walker. Doctors told me I'd likely never return to hairdressing and might be confined to a wheelchair for life. They also told me that if the new chemo didn't work, I had about a month to live. I had no choice but to accept that reality. When a doctor gives you news like that, what can you do? It triggered something deep in me, almost a spiritual acceptance. I do believe in miracles, and within a week, the tumors in my abdomen had disappeared. Encouraged, I continued the aggressive chemotherapy. By the time I completed treatment, I was told I was being fast-tracked for a bone marrow transplant at another hospital with a dedicated transplant center. Before transferring, I spoke with the head nurse of the floor to express my gratitude. I also asked if I could thank the doctor from the ER, the one with the gold-rimmed glasses. The nurse, who had worked at the hospital for over 30 years, looked at me confused. She told me that no such doctor had ever worked in the emergency department. She knew the staff well and was certain. I was stunned. Had I been visited by an angel or something else? The person I saw was physically there, even touched my wrist to take my pulse. After the transplant, which was a success, I entered full remission. I had beaten stage 4 lymphoma, a rare and aggressive cancer. I no longer use a wheelchair, and sensation in my hands and legs has returned. Even more, I've gone back to work as a hairstylist. Looking back, I still remember that figure who told me I'd be all right. Through everything, the illness, the intense treatments, and the fear, I never truly believed I was going to die. From that moment on, I knew it would be the hardest thing I'd face, but I also believed I would survive. And I did. They say children are more sensitive to the supernatural. I'm not sure if I completely believe that, but what I'm about to share is a real account of recurring nightmares I experienced as a child. These weren't just strange dreams. They always followed the same unsettling pattern. A dark, malevolent voice would speak to me through fire in the attic or from deep It wasn't just threatening, it felt evil. Sometimes it targeted me or my family, and at other times it would speak in a language I couldn't understand. One particular nightmare stood out from the rest, and it has stayed with me my entire life. It's a bit long, so get comfortable. In the dream, I found myself standing outside my home at night, something I would have never done as a kid. I was raised to come inside the moment the streetlights came on or a face getting grounded. From outside, I could see my family through the window. The lights were on and they were sitting down for dinner. I stared at them, confused as to why no one seemed to notice I was missing. I began pounding on the window, hoping they'd see me, but nothing happened. At that time, most of my friends lived just a house or two away. Suddenly, I noticed a swing set had appeared in our driveway. My best friend Kyle was on it, slowly swinging back and forth. Seeing him brought immediate relief. I wasn't alone, but something about the moment felt wrong. I walked over and sat next to him on the swing. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at me. I tried getting his attention, but got nothing. That's when I remembered some candy I'd stashed in the backyard. Real candy I'd actually hidden from my parents. I figured that if anything could snap him out of it, this would. I told him to wait there while I grabbed the surprise. Still, no response. I ran to the spot, grabbed the starburst, and hurried back, hoping he hadn't left me alone in that eerie place. But when I got there, the swing was empty, gently swaying. He was gone. Panic set in. Every house on the street was now completely dark and locked tight. I turned toward the road and watched in horror as each streetlight began to shut off, one by one, coming closer and closer. I already knew what lived in that darkness. It was the same presence that had haunted my other dreams. I sprinted to the front door, ringing the bell over and over, desperate to get inside as the darkness closed in. I knew this time would be different. This time, it wouldn't just be a dream. I felt a mix of fear and betrayal, like I'd been lured into a trap. There was nothing I could do. The last thing I remember was shutting my eyes just before the final light went out, accompanied by the sound of deep, demonic laughter. Maybe something really did find a way in that night. I never had that nightmare again. But since then, I've felt drawn to dark themes, and sometimes I'm hit with sudden waves of deep depression. I know it was a dream, but that doesn't make it feel any less real. This happened to a friend of mine just before Halloween. He works as a security guard at a massive shopping mall alongside a few others. Everyone went off to patrol their assigned areas, and he began his usual rounds, checking shops and walking through the main part of the mall. With Halloween approaching, the mall was crowded. That's when he noticed something strange. A figure in a cloak, moving smoothly toward him. It brushed against him as it passed, and for the first time in his job, he felt something unsettling. Fear and a sense of something sinister. He called out to it, hoping to get a response. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" he shouted. The figure didn't react, so he followed it. At one point, it turned slightly, as if checking to see if someone was behind, then kept going. But the chase came to a sudden halt when an elderly Asian man fell in a nearby store. Being a decent person, he stopped to help the man. When he looked back, the cloaked figure had disappeared, completely gone. He decided to take his break, and just as he reached the break room, he ran into his friend, Rex. "Hey, did you happen to see someone in a cloak walking around?" he asked. Rex turned pale and replied, "Yes," and this time it was staring at me. They both sat down, quietly shaken, and didn't bring up the cloaked figure again. Whether it was someone in costume or part of something more disturbing, they weren't sure. After finishing his lunch, he went back to work. As the afternoon turned into evening, the crowds thinned and the stores began closing. Once the place was nearly empty, his night shift officially began. He climbed into his patrol cart, started it up, and began driving through the lower floor. It was completely dark, with only the cart spotlight providing visibility. But it wasn't just the darkness that unsettled him. That cloaked figure might still be inside. Then he heard it, the sound of a child laughing. The laughter echoed from different spots around him, like it was mocking him, the way kids sometimes do to get a reaction. But the mall was closed, meaning no one should be there. "Who's there?" he called out. The laughter stopped, and everything fell silent again. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the second floor. Startled, he headed toward the escalator and made his way up. As he turned a corner, he saw a vending machine had been knocked over, and next to it was something massive and dark. He pointed his flashlight at it and saw what looked like the back of a grizzly bear, but far larger than any he'd seen before. As the light hit it, the creature stopped moving and slowly turned. What faced him wasn't a bear at all. Its front half resembled a bobcat, with glowing red eyes and sharp, elongated fangs. The creature rose onto its hind legs, standing at least 7 to 8 feet tall. It spread its front limbs for balance. He could feel those red eyes piercing into him. Then, in a warped version of his own voice, it said, "Who's there?" before unleashing a horrific, ear-splitting screech. That was enough for him. He jumped back into his cart, raced to the mall entrance, and ran outside. To this day, he still works at that same mall, and hasn't seen the creature again. I was cave diving when I found something that shouldn't exist. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this. No one will believe me. Not really. Honestly, I barely believe it myself. But I lived it. Cave diving has been part of my life for years. It's the kind of experience that either grips you with fear or makes you feel more alive than anything else can. Crawling through dark, waterlogged stone tunnels with just enough space to move. It changes how your brain works. You stop thinking in straight paths. Everything feels both narrow and infinite. Last weekend, I drove nearly 4 hours to reach a cave I'd heard about for years. It's not marked on any official maps. Just a rumor passed around in old online diving circles. A collapsed sinkhole hidden in the woods, masked behind a rusted, vine-covered fence so tangled you'd walk past it without noticing. People said the cave below was alive. I assumed that was just exaggeration. I went alone. No backup, no safety line. Yeah, it was reckless. But it was so remote that bringing anyone else would raise questions I didn't want to answer. I didn't want anyone else claiming the site. The entrance was a narrow shaft, barely wide enough to squeeze through. My tank scraped the sides as I descended. The temperature dropped sharply the moment I slipped inside, and the rock was damp, coated in something faintly metallic in scent. It felt like the earth had swallowed me whole. For the first hour, it was what I expected. Tight crawls, water pooling in odd, veined patterns on the floor. My flashlight sliced into the dark, only revealing a few feet of tunnel at a time. Then I found the passage. It wasn't like the others. The walls looked different, porous like old coral or brittle bone. When I touched it, the surface felt soft, almost pliable. That should have been my cue to turn back. Every instinct in me said so, but I kept going. The tunnel grew tighter and sloped downward. I had to crawl, the walls pressing in so close I could feel my pulse in the stone. I kept telling myself, it's just rock, just another empty space. Then I heard the breathing, not mine, and not human. It was deep, ragged, wet, like something struggling to inhale through too many crooked throats. It echoed from ahead, getting louder the deeper I moved. I should have turned around, forced my way back to the surface. But I didn't. I went forward. Eventually, the tunnel widened into a chamber. My flashlight shook as I swept it across the walls. And that's when I saw the truth. The walls weren't stone. They were flesh. Pale, shifting tissue stretched across every surface, pulsing with a slow, heavy rhythm. Thick veins throbbed beneath it, sprawling like roots from a massive tree. And in the middle of the room, something stirred. At first, I thought it was a pool of water, but then it rose, strand by strand, pulling itself upward into a shape. No eyes, no mouth, just a shifting mass of translucent tendrils groping through the air. And the smell, wet, rotten. It soaked into my gear and clung to my skin. I froze, couldn't move. My body understood before my mind did. This wasn't just a living thing. The entire cave was alive, and it was waking up. I tried to back away, slowly, quietly. The creature in the center hadn't fully formed yet, its tendrils still knotting together. I hoped if I moved carefully, I could slip away unnoticed. I turned, crouching low, inching toward the exit. My flashlight quivered, casting jerky shadows. The walls looked like they were writhing. I held my breath, focused on every motion. Then my foot slipped, just a slight scrape, a soft sound, but it was enough. The creature froze, tendrils locked in place like they were being pulled tight. A low, wet clicking filled the chamber, vibrating through the flesh, and the walls reacted. Veins swelled, the tissue shivered. The cave itself lurched forward, like something forcing itself through its own skin. Panic took over. I dropped all caution and scrambled for the tunnel, clawing at the walls, tearing at the slick, pulsing surface. My flashlight bounced wildly, throwing everything into flashing chaos. Behind me, the breathing sped up, grew louder. Something followed, heavy, wet, tendrils slapping the walls with a sickening speed. I couldn't turn to look, but I could feel the vibrations chasing me, echoing through my bones. I kept pushing forward, my gloves filling with grit and slime. My gear caught on the tightening walls. Every second mattered. Then the tunnel changed. Not a split, not a fork. It moved. The fleshy stone flexed like a throat clenching shut. The way I had come in folded in on itself. The exit was gone. I crashed into a dead end. My helmet slammed the wall. Pain shot down my neck. I turned, trying to light the path behind me, and I saw it. The creature nearly filled the tunnel now. It didn't walk. It dragged itself on countless filaments, tipped with small claw-like ends. And it was smiling. not with a mouth. There wasn't one, but the surface rippled, shaping into a grotesque grin. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted me alive. The walls pulsed again, squeezing tighter, the space shrinking like a fist about to crush. My light flickered, then went out. In the darkness, the breathing closed in. I forced myself to move, one hand at a time, feeling along the slick floor, hoping to find something, anything. My fingers hit something hard, sharp. Without thinking, I grabbed it. The edge sliced my glove and cut my skin. The pain helped. It grounded me. I drove the shard into the wall. The flesh screamed. Not sound, but vibration. A high, piercing pulse that rattled my skull and burst my nose. I stabbed again and again. Each strike tore deeper, past soft tissue, into twitching muscle, down to wet bone, and what looked like nerve bundles. The whole tunnel shook. I heard it shriek behind me, a horrible jittering sound like dozens of mouths tearing open. It was faster now. It knew I was hurting it. I dug in deeper, widening the hole. My hands soaked in blood. Mine or the cave's, I couldn't tell. The air reeked of decay and burnt chemicals. Then I saw light, faint, cold and bluish. Not sunlight, but not this place. I forced myself through the deer, pushing past sticky tissue. The cave fought back. Veins coiled around my legs, tendrils whipped at my arms. But I kicked and clawed until I broke free, screaming as I slipped through. For a moment, something grabbed my ankle. Hands, thin, bony, too many joints. I didn't turn back. I tore myself through, dropped hard on the other side, and slid across slick stone. My flashlight, somehow still attached, flickered back on, and I saw where I was. Not another chamber, a nest. Hundreds, maybe thousands of those tendril creatures, curled up in heaps, pulsing softly in time with the cave's breath. They hadn't noticed me. Not yet. But one stirred. I didn't move, barely breathed. It settled again. The others kept pulsing in sleep. I needed to go. As I crept along the wall, my flashlight brushed over strange markings, grooves spiraling through the flesh. Arrows, symbols, a path left by someone before me, followed them. They led to a shadowed corner, and there I saw it, the largest one, rooted to the floor with thick cords of flesh. Its body was stretched thin, skin pulled taut over sharp, unnatural bones. Its head was a knot of tendrils, forming shapes, faces, crying, laughing, screaming. It wasn't breathing. It was dreaming, and the entire nest breathed in sync with those dreams. If it woke, they all would. I moved toward the carvings. My legs shook with every step. Halfway there, the ceiling tendrils quivered. The giant stirred. The nest began to wake. I stumbled toward the wall, found a hidden fissure behind the markings, and squeezed through just as chaos erupted. Tendrils thrashed, creatures shrieked. The large one began to unfold. I climbed through the narrow shaft, kicking and clawing, pushing past everything trying to pull me down, until I broke through onto cold, damp grass. Behind me, silence. Above, the sky glowed with early dawn. The breathing was gone. For now. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I got up, staggered to my truck, and drove. I haven't been back since, but late at night, when everything's quiet and I can't sleep, I swear I still feel it, that slow, tidal rhythm, getting closer. I moved last month, packed up, left the state. It didn't help. 2 nights ago, I found something on my living room floor. A thin, pale thread, still twitching. Last night, I put my ear to the wall. It wasn't the sounds of the city I heard. It was breathing. And this time, it wasn't calling. It was tracking. It's digging beneath my bedroom. My dad never allowed me to have a phone. He'd already lost one son to an online predator, and he wasn't about to take that risk again. I tried to convince him I wasn't like Kyle. I didn't want to meet strangers online. I just wanted to message my friends and watch YouTube on the bus. But he wouldn't listen. Since Kyle vanished, I rarely left my room. When dinner was ready, I waited until Dad had eaten before getting my plate. It was simpler that way, without his eyes on me. If I took too long, he'd bark. What? Is not good enough for you? Before, Kyle used to deflect Dad's anger. He'd shield me from it. I remember one time when I spilled a can of red paint in the garage. Kyle took the blame. He even got hit for it. When people asked about the bruise under his eye, he said it was from hockey. I never got to thank him for that. I had a part-time job bagging groceries at Quick Mart and managed to save $200. Devin, a friend of mine, sold me an old Motorola smartphone. I added my contacts, downloaded YouTube, Spotify, and a few other apps, and made this Reddit account. To hide it from Dad, I pried up a loose floorboard in my bedroom. Mine, not ours anymore. Without Kyle, there was no shared space, no shared desk or closet. It all belonged to me now. Once I had regular internet access. Curiosity got the better of me. I looked up Kyle's name. A few recent articles came up, and one headline on a lesser-known site stopped me cold. Father investigated in missing child's case. The article showed a photo of Dad beside his Lexus. Either stepping in or out, I couldn't tell. Just then, I heard his boots creaking on the stairs. I quickly slipped the phone back under the floorboards and climbed into bed, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Dad leaned in the doorway, his words slightly slurred. "Good night, Bailey." I'd noticed recently that he kept a flask in his coat. It hadn't been this bad since the early days of the divorce. "Good night, Dad," I said, but something slipped out. Is there any news about Kyle? His mood changed immediately. "You know the rule. We don't talk about him. It's not your concern." He left the door slightly open. I thought about closing it, but if he got up in the night and saw it shut, he'd go off on me. I turned onto my side and tried to sleep. Just as I started drifting, it began. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It sounded like fingernails dragging on skin, or maybe a shovel in dirt. I glanced at the floorboard where I hid the phone. The noise stopped. It felt almost like a message. "Yes, I'm here." Did I leave Spotify playing? Quietly, I climbed out of bed and crouched by the board, peeking at the door to make sure Dad wasn't nearby. I pressed my ear to the floor. Scourge, scourge, scourge. And then it clicked. Those weren't random noises. They were fingers clawing through earth, like something was moving upward from beneath the house. I jumped back into bed and shut my eyes. It was irrational, absurd even, but I couldn't bring myself to lift the board and look. The next day, I asked Dad about it. He didn't hesitate, said it was probably rats. They sometimes nest in the floors or walls. Maybe one had fallen in and gotten stuck, but the scratching didn't stop. Night after night, it continued. I started wondering how long a rat could last. 5 days, a week. After 2 weeks, I knew it wasn't a rat. The sounds got louder, closer. Some nights, when it was completely quiet outside, I heard a faint, strained breathing through the floor. I forced myself to ignore it for a couple more days. Maybe it would stop. But last night, everything changed. It began around 2 or 3 in the morning, as usual. Then it paused. For hours. Just when I thought it was finally over, it returned, more violently this time. Nails dragging across wood. The loose floorboard started to shift, rising slightly as something underneath pressed upward. Paralyzed with fear, I grabbed a stack of textbooks and piled them on top. The wobbling stopped, but the scratching underneath continued. I stayed awake until sunrise. When the light came through the window, I removed the books and lifted the floorboard. My phone was gone. In its place was a narrow hole, just wide enough for an arm, leading into darkness. My chest tightened as I stared down. With no phone, I had no flashlight. Instead, I leaned down and listened. Breathing. Those faint, wheezing breaths, as if someone was inhaling through dirt. My pulse raced. It was insane, impossible even, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something, or someone, was buried down there. At school, I borrowed Devin's phone and dialed my number. He gave a dry laugh. What? You think whatever's in the hole knows how to answer a phone? It rang 7 times. Then, someone picked up. Hello, I whispered. A voice came through the static, familiar and unmistakable. Kyle's voice. Don't trust him. Work at a can't-kill shelter. Hi. My name? Well, that doesn't really matter. If I'm right, people will find out soon enough. If I'm wrong, it won't make a difference. No one's going to believe this without proof. And if proof does come out, no one will be able to deny it. So I suppose my words won't change much, but I still need to speak. I work at a no-kill animal shelter, but not the kind you're picturing. We're not rescuing pets or finding them homes. This isn't a rehab center. We're in a tiny, rural, southern town, basically in the middle of nowhere. We're a no-kill shelter not because we don't want to euthanize the animals, but because we physically can't. The animals here don't die, or if they do, they don't stay that way. We take care of animals that simply can't be killed. From what I've learned, this started sometime in the 1960s. The man who had this job before me taught me everything I know. Said it began when a dog was brought into the old town shelter. It had been hit by a car and was in rough shape. Staff were trying to reach the emergency vet when suddenly the dog came back to life. But it wasn't the same. It started climbing the walls like a lizard. Then another showed up, and another. These animals weren't just immortal. They were unnatural. You could crush any of them down to pulp with a hammer, and within 24 hours, they'd be whole again. I don't know how it works. Most of the older folks just say not to question it too much. But as the number of these creatures grew, the town eventually set up a separate place for them in the 1980s. They repurposed an old factory outside of town, used to make trailer frames, shut down in the late 60s. It was cleared out and turned into our facility. As of this morning, we've got a 138 animals, all unusual, all unkillable. Some, admittedly, are dangerous. Most are your typical pet types. Dogs, cats, a few birds, even a couple of reptiles. We've got standard dog runs, cat cages, tanks, and bird enclosures. Nothing you wouldn't see in a regular shelter. 6 of us work here. Most of the job's done during the day, but we take turns covering overnight shifts. We have a lot of dogs. One is a Great Dane with 6 legs. Super sweet, but always tripping over himself. We've grown really fond of him. Then there's Geechee, a little terrier mix, who has a tongue like a chameleon. You can hold out a treat from 8 feet away and she'll snatch it in one go. Always makes us laugh. There are plenty of cats too. Phoenix, a tabby, is curled up on a box next to me while I type. She's sleeping on an old towel in a paper box lid. She's warm to the touch. Not enough to burn you right away, but enough that you'll pull your hand back after a few seconds. Hold her against skin for half a minute, and you'd get a nasty burn. It's a wonder she hasn't started a fire with all the odd spots she naps on. One of the many reasons we wear long pants. Phoenix loves to rub up against legs. Then there's Bruce, a boa constrictor, about 6 feet long, pretty calm for a snake his size. But he's unsettling. His ribs stick out about 6 inches and let him move like a centipede instead of slithering. The scraping sound he makes crawling around gives me the creeps. Still, give him a heat lamp and a thawed rabbit every couple weeks and he's no trouble. We also house 14 cockatiels. They look like the kind you'd see in pet stores, but each has a feathered ridge down its back, sharp as blades. They drink blood, too, like tiny vampires. But their songs are nice, oddly enough. Then there's Baron, a ferret, but not a normal one. He's nearly 4 feet long if you stretch him out, though his head and limbs are normal-sized. His torso is just abnormally extended. He catches mice like a snake, squeezes them to death, eats them, then spits them up about an hour later. We still feed him regular ferret chow, but if he doesn't get a mouse once a week, he gets irritable and starts biting. There's a standard 60-gallon aquarium from the PetSmart in the next town over. We've stocked it with glowing tetras, but these glow constantly, and as they swim, they leave light trails behind. One of the guys says the trails mess with his head. Personally, I think he's exaggerating, but when I'm alone in that room, I don't stare too long. Better safe than sorry. We've got a lot more animals, and they just keep getting stranger. Some are dangerous. We've had accidents. Last fall, one of the guys brought in a chinchilla. He skipped the usual protocol, handled it without gloves before its observation period ended. The chinchilla did a little shake, like when they take dust baths, and a dozen quills burst from its fur. 3 hit him in the palm. 1 pierced clean through his finger. His throat swelled up immediately, like a severe allergic reaction. The EpiPen did nothing. We told his family he got bit by a rattlesnake. I doubt they believed us, but they didn't push the issue. The chinchilla's still here. If you follow procedures, these creatures are mostly just odd. A bit unpredictable, sure, but no more dangerous than typical pets. Most days are uneventful. Most days. Then there are the days when someone has to feed Omega. We don't really know what Omega is. He might have started out as a horse. He's about that size. 4 legs, vaguely horse-shaped. But his front legs are longer than the back, and he's built heavier than any draft horse I've seen. His head resembles a horse's, but his jaw opens unnaturally wide, like a crocodile, and the teeth aren't for eating grass. Jet black coat. He's got a mane, but the hair is oily and thick, and it moves. I swear it moves on its own. Nobody believes me, but I've seen it. Omega's got his own enclosure. He can't be kept near any other animal. Thankfully, he doesn't need to eat often. We follow a strict 2-person rule to feed him. A bucket of raw butcher meat mixed with alfalfa and some kibble. He's extremely aggressive toward food, toward us, toward everything. He's the only one we feed using a sliding tray and a broomstick. One person handles the tray, the other stays nearby, ready to pull them away if anything goes wrong. We hose his enclosure from outside. Nobody wants to go in. We try to treat all the animals well, but with Omega, no one's taking chances. He showed up around 10 years ago, about a year before I started. But I've heard the story enough that I believe it. It was close to midnight. Ricky, who runs the local scrapyard and owns the town's only reliable tow truck, got a call from Cyrus, an old local known for drinking and drifting. Cyrus would have been in his mid-60s by then, always hanging around town, getting into minor trouble, never really harmful. That night, Cyrus called from the payphone at the gas station on the edge of town. He said an out-of-towner's car overheated and had broken down nearby. The driver had managed to coast it to the gas station, not realizing it was no longer open overnight. Ricky thought it was odd. Cyrus didn't own a car, but he figured Cyrus had just stumbled on the situation while hanging around the station, which he often used as a place to crash. Safe enough, and he'd be ready to ask for change when the place opened in the morning. Ricky always says he wishes he hadn't answered the phone. The rain was pounding on the roof of his trailer, and he could have easily ignored the call. But he couldn't stand the idea of someone stranded out there in the weather. And deep down, he knew he'd end up giving Cyrus a ride anyway. So he threw on his reflective raincoat, fired up his old International 4300, and set out for the gas station. Halfway there, he got on the radio and let the highway patrol know what he was doing. Everyone on the night shift knew him. He was the go-to for wrecks. He got there just before midnight. Cyrus was already chatting up the out-of-towner. Sorry, I know I'm rambling. This part doesn't really change anything. Maybe I'm just stalling before we get to where this story's headed. Anyway, Ricky loaded the guy's old Chevy Cavalier onto the flatbed, and the three of them, Ricky, the stranger, and of course, Cyrus, piled into the truck and headed back toward town. There's a sharp, blind curve just before you get back into town. Everyone local knows about it. Ricky had been called out to that spot dozens of times. Cars in ditches, wrecks caused by folks misjudging the turn. But that night, Ricky was tired, irritated by Cyrus rambling nonstop. And as he came up on the curve, something darted into the beam of his tow truck headlights. The road was slick, and there's no way to maneuver a tow truck like a sports car, especially one carrying a full load. So, whatever was in the road, he hit it hard, dragged the thing a quarter-mile under the wheels before stopping. Ricky cursed, flipped on the hazard lights, grabbed his flashlight and stepped out to check for damage. He was inspecting the rear, making sure the vehicle he was towing hadn't shifted, when he heard a sound. He described it later as a mix between a gator's bellow and a mountain lion's scream. Spinning around, he shone his light down the road. In the beam, he saw a crumpled form. Whatever he had hit was moving, twitching, trying to stand. Ricky had hit animals before. Comes with the job. But that truck, a 30,000-pound International, not counting the car on the back, was a beast. Even an elephant wouldn't survive a direct hit like that. If this creature was still alive, that meant it wasn't normal. The creature, later known as Omega, stood up. Its head rose almost level with Ricky's, and Ricky's a big guy. It let out that horrible noise again. Then it looked at him. Its eyes locked onto his, and it growled. This is the same Ricky who served 2 tours in Iraq, drove an MRAP, and once had a gun pulled on him while repossessing a car. He just told the guy to call the bank, loaded the Charger, and drove off, laughing. That same Ricky, standing there on that road, pissed himself. Behind him, the tow truck cab door opened. Cyrus stuck his head out. "What's taking so long?" he hollered. "Shut up, get back in the truck, and turn off the lights," Ricky hissed, trying not to raise his voice. He killed his flashlight and slowly backed away, eyes fixed on the creature. The moon was bright enough to see its silhouette as he crept back toward the truck. The truck lights and hazards blinked off. At least Cyrus had the sense to do that. Ricky grabbed the handle, climbed into the cab, and shut the door behind him. Cyrus squinted at him. What was that all about? Ricky was gripping the wheel, breathing hard. "It's an animal," he said. Cyrus frowned, and Ricky looked at him, then noticed the out-of-towner staring at them like they were crazy. "Cyrus, it's one of those animals," he said. That shut Cyrus up. Ricky reached for the radio, calling the sheriff. The out-of-towner had enough. "What is going on? You two are acting nuts. What did you hit?" Ricky sighed. Locals forget how strange this stuff seems to outsiders. "Sir, I understand this is confusing. Just hang tight." The dispatcher's voice came through the radio. "Ricky, what the hell are you doing out this late?" Ricky responded. "I'm at Dead Man's Curve with Cyrus and a customer. I need help. Wake the sheriff. Bring at least one other guy, and maybe a couple from the shelter too." A pause. Then Mike came back, his voice serious. "Roger that. You okay?" "Yeah, but something about this one's off." "Get here fast," Ricky said. "We're on it. Stay safe," Mike replied. "Thanks," Ricky muttered, hanging up the radio. "What the hell is going on?" The out-of-towner snapped. Ricky swallowed. "Sir, there's something dangerous outside. Police and animal control are on the way. Please stay in the truck." He checked the mirror. The animal was gone. That was somehow worse. The man shook his head. "Nope, this is a scam. You're trying to shake me down." "Sir, no one is trying." Ricky started, but the man had already opened the door. "No," Ricky yelled, but it was too late. The man slammed the door behind him and started walking down the road. "Idiot's gonna get himself killed," Cyrus muttered. Ricky reached for the radio again to hurry Mike, but the truck had shut off and the radio's battery-saving mode had kicked in. He cursed and started the engine. The headlights flared back on. The out-of-towner had barely gone a few hundred feet. He turned, squinting into the light, and then Omega stepped out of the woods behind him. Still thinking it was a prank, the man gave them the finger and turned back around. Then he screamed. It happened in seconds. Ricky later said something that big shouldn't be able to move so fast. Omega charged forward, jaws snapping. The creature struck the man once, ripping through him with terrifying ease. From shoulder to waist, it opened the man's torso nearly in half. Omega sniffed the body, poked it, then tore off a chunk of meat. Cyrus clutched his face. "Oh Jesus, oh Jesus, oh Jesus," he mumbled. Ricky fumbled with the radio in a panic. He hit the wrong button, and a loud screech of feedback blared through the cab. On the road, Omega's head shot up. "Shit," Ricky whispered. The creature began to stalk the truck. As it neared, they lost sight of it under the massive hood. Then it leapt. The truck rocked as Omega landed on the hood, staring them down through the windshield. It slammed a foot into the glass, cracking it. Then flashing red and blue lights washed over the scene. Omega turned. A shot rang out. The blast knocked Omega off the hood. Ricky saw the highway patrol cruiser parked nearby. The sheriff, an older man with a handlebar mustache, held a heavy-duty Mossberg. He racked it and fired again. And again. Another officer took cover and drew his pistol. A second truck pulled up. Ricky recognized the shelter's old F-250. The sheriff signaled for them to stay inside. He approached Omega, who was twitching on the road. He placed the barrel against its ribs and fired one last time. Omega jerked once, then lay still. The sheriff waited, watching, then waved over the shelter crew. "You guys all right?" he called. "Out. I think so," Ricky answered. Though, all right, felt like a stretch. The sheriff walked down to the body, removed his hat. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," he muttered. "Sorry, I'm rambling. I've heard this story too many times to keep it brief." The shelter team, including the old guy who trained me, loaded Omega onto the truck. They needed to secure it fast. The sheriff shut down the road, had another officer drive Ricky home, and let Cyrus crash at the station. The coroner came to collect the body. By morning, Ricky was back to retrieve his truck. Officially, it was called a car accident. Lost control on a wet curve. No close relatives meant no questions. We held Omega in a steel shipping container for a week. Then the local metal shop built a specialized run. Fully enclosed concrete foundation, reinforced bear-proof fencing, like the kind used on the Appalachian Trail. Heavy-duty stuff. No one remembers why we started calling it Omega. The name just stuck. Cyrus drank himself to death a few years later. Ricky still owns the yard, but doesn't drive anymore. Of the two shelter guys, one died of cancer last year. That was my mentor. The other couldn't handle Omega and left the state. I took his place, and now I'm telling you this story, sitting at the desk in our shared office, chain-smoking like I'm trying to inhale the whole pack. My hands won't stop shaking, 'cause Omega's gone. I checked on him at the start of my shift. He was there. Me and a day shift guy fed him. Nothing unusual. Day guy left. I did rounds. Then I noticed Yurtla, our Russian tortoise, wandering without his shell. He actually can leave it. Strangest damn thing. You have to check on him every shift to make sure he doesn't forget where he left it. I found his shell outside the macaw enclosure, the weird one with the toucan beak and lizard tail. And on the way back I checked Omega's pen. He was gone. No holes, no damage, no sign of escape. Just vanished. I called the sheriff. No one answered. I think I hear sirens in the distance. I'm scared. Scared of what Omega can do. Scared of what might happen if the town thinks this was my fault. But most of all, I'm terrified of what happens if Omega comes back. I believe the goatman lived in our house for months, without us realizing. We used to joke about the noises in the attic. Old place, weak beams, maybe squirrels. But lately, I'm starting to think it was never coming from the attic. Maybe it was already inside. It began with the smell, musty like wet fur, mixed with old metal. It would come and go, strongest in the hallway, or sometimes the laundry room. Dad said it was the water heater. Mom blamed the pipes, but it wasn't that. Then came the sounds. Light footsteps, hooves on tile. Always a little after 3 a.m. At first I thought it was the dog, but she wouldn't go near the hallway after dark. Just stood at the edge, tail down, whining. Then I began catching glimpses, quick flashes, reflections in the mirror, shapes just outside my bedroom door. Something tall, awkward in the way it moved. Humanoid, but not quite. Too rigid, too quiet. My brother laughed it off, said it was just sleep paralysis. Until the night I found him in the garage, barefoot, staring at the wall. I asked him what he was doing. He didn't face me. He only said, "He's almost done." That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, my brother's been different. He repeats himself, forgets basic words, sometimes just stands, staring at the microwave like it's talking to him. Last night he asked me how long he'd lived here. He was born in that room. Tonight I found hoof prints in the dust downstairs. They came from inside the furnace. No tracks leading out. The furnace hadn't been on for hours. But when I touched it, the metal was warm. The prints, small, split, pressed deep into the dust, led out from the vents and across the concrete. They looped once, then twice, and stopped at the wall behind the breaker panel. They didn't go back. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe. Or fear, like part of me already expected what I'd find. I moved the breaker aside. There was a crack in the concrete behind it. Not a stress fracture. This was intentional. Cleanly cut. About a foot wide. Black inside. Crouched and shined my phone light into it. More hoof prints leading downward. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I wedged my fingers in the gap and pulled. The wall gave way with a groan. Dust spilled down like soot. A section swung open, revealing a tunnel. It was narrow, damp, threaded with roots, like something had chewed through the foundation. The air inside reeked of fur and smoke. I stepped in. Some parts of the walls were soft, warm, almost like they were breathing. The deeper I went, the hotter it got. My phone light flickered, then steadied. The hoof prints changed, larger now, heavier, and not just steps anymore. Drag marks, like whatever made them was crawling. Then I heard it, breathing, not mine, not nearby, something huge, wet, lungs full of rot, straining to stay quiet. I should have gone back, but ahead there was light, orange, flickering, reflecting off stone and soil. I moved forward, heartbeat pounding. Each step sank into earth that felt too soft, too warm. The tunnel opened into a chamber, and there he was, my brother, naked, kneeling, back to me. Symbols marked his skin, some carved, others burned in. His arms stretched forward, hands trembling, and the wall in front of him. It wasn't a wall, it was a figure, massive, buried into the earth, a horned outline, limbs too long, mouth impossibly wide. It looked like it was sleeping, or pretending to be, folded in on itself like a wounded animal. But it was real. Each breath it took pulled the air from my lungs. My ears popped, my skin prickled just being near it. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My brother turned. His eyes were gone. 2 dark holes, still wet. He smiled. The shape behind him stirred. Not much, just a twitch. But the tunnel walls groaned, and the hoof prints behind me began to fill with ash. I ran, didn't think, didn't breathe, just turned and sprinted through the tunnel. Hands scraped raw on damp stone, phone light bouncing wildly. Something moved behind me. Not fast, not chasing, just unfolding, stretching, like it remembered it had limbs. The walls felt tighter now, hotter, like running through someone's throat. Each breath tasted like rust and hair. I swear I felt fingers brush the back of my neck, long and thin as bone. But I didn't stop. I threw myself out of the crawl space behind the breaker, slammed the panels shut, and leaned my whole weight into it, like that would help. The silence that followed was worse than the sound, like the house itself was listening. I didn't tell anyone, not right away. Tried to rationalize it, blamed gas leaks, lack of sleep, even told myself I'd imagined the symbols carved into my brother's back, until they showed up on me, faint at first, along my ribs, one near my collarbone, like someone had traced them on my skin while I slept. They're darker now, and I don't sleep anymore. Neither does my brother. Sometimes he stands in the garage, humming a tune I've never heard. Last night I watched him from the hallway for nearly 10 minutes before I realized I was already standing next to him. He turned and smiled, but so did the other one. And now I'm not sure which one of us came back out of the tunnel. I'm a psychologist. A part of my client just walked out. I was coming back with the coffee my client had asked for when he suddenly burst out of the office, nearly colliding with me. I stepped aside just in time, somehow managing not to spill the coffee. He headed straight for the exit. These dramatic incidents always seem to happen when my receptionist wasn't around. I quickly set the coffee down on a nearby table and rushed after him. "Julius," I called out, not his real name. He looked furious, so much so it felt like the air around him was burning. He yanked open the clinic door and ran out. I made it to the elevator only to have the doors shut in. My face, I considered the stairs, but doubted I could catch up. So I hurried back to my office, thinking I'd call his emergency contact. I needed to make sure he stayed safe. But when I opened the office door, I froze. Julius was still sitting there, calm and composed, without a trace of the rage I'd just witnessed. "What?" I looked at him, then back at the door. "You have a twin?" I asked, already doubting my own theory. I hadn't seen anyone else enter, but a twin could have come in while I was out. "No, that was..." He paused, then sighed. "Take a seat," he said. I hesitated. Those were the kind of words you heard from doctors or police before bad news. Still, I sat down. "Remember when we discussed parts?" he asked. I nodded. We had been talking about the different facets of the mind. How people can have protective parts, angry parts, insecure parts, and others. I mentioned I had an angry, aggressive part that sometimes took over. and when that happened, I'd lose control. He reminded me. I nodded again, and we talked about having a dialogue with that part, understanding its role, its beliefs, that kind of thing. I added, "What happened?" "Well," he said, "while you were making coffee, I told that part it had to leave. That wasn't part of our therapeutic process. Our goal wasn't to reject or eliminate parts. It was to understand and integrate them. Still, I focused on the immediate issue." "Wait, and then?" I asked, though I already had a feeling where this was going. "And then he left. That was him who stormed out." "So, you're saying a part of you physically left the room?" Julius nodded. My stomach sank. He had either lost touch with reality, was trying to fool me, or somehow I was the one hallucinating. I had clearly seen someone who looked like Julius run out, yet here he was. If this is some kind of April Fool's prank you've really outdone. "It's not," he cut me off sharply. "When we talked about parts, I thought you understood." "Understood what?" "That my parts aren't just aspects of my personality. They have their own bodies, their own lives." I hesitated. My hand hovered near the emergency button, but then I met his gaze. Calm, certain. My neck tingled with cold sweat. "Parts therapy is just a psychological framework," I said carefully. "It reflects how our minds are complex and made up of many layers. It's not meant to be taken literally. But in my case," Julius said firmly, "it is literal. If what you're saying is true." "It is true," he snapped, frustration bubbling over. "Watch." He turned and spoke to the air beside him. "Moby, get out of my body. Please, show her. She needs to know you're real." Nothing happened. I gave him a gentle smile, trying to smooth over the tension. "It's okay, Julius. Everything's..." "Shh. He's coming," Julius said. I held back a sigh, then blinked, and blinked again. Julius was splitting, literally. For a moment, he looked like a conjoined twin. 2 heads, 4 arms, 1 set of legs. My stomach churned. Then, slowly, a second set of legs formed and stepped away from the first. "What the..." I shouted. My first time swearing in front of a client, or clients. 2 versions of Julius now stood before me. The second looked identical, but his posture sagged under visible sorrow, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "All right, come back in," Julius said to his double. The second Julius hesitated, then slowly stepped back in, disappearing into the original. I slumped back in my chair. Holy wow. What is going on? "I've lived like this forever," Julius said. "Different parts of me sometimes take over. Sometimes they just walk out and do their own thing." He exhaled deeply. "It's a relief to finally tell someone. You wouldn't believe the lengths I've gone to hide them. Them, plural. I tried to process it. I wanted to wake up from whatever dream this was, but I couldn't. Weird things happen in life. I'd seen enough to know that much. So, your parts can leave your body, physically. How is that even possible? I mean, basic physics. Where does the extra matter come from? And what about your brain? Does it duplicate too?" "No idea. I've never asked. I don't want to end up in a lab." Julius's expression darkened. A cruel smirk crept in. "And if you tell anyone, I'll kill you." I stood up, startled. "Sorry," he said quickly. "That wasn't me. That was Darius." Darius was his so-called murderous part. Unlike his angry part, who threw tantrums, Darius was calm and calculating. He planned. He waited. Talking about him as an internal struggle was one thing. Knowing he could literally step out and act on violent thoughts was something else entirely. Tell Darius that I'm not planning to tell anyone, I said carefully. But if he keeps threatening me, that changes things. Confidentiality or not, Julius growled. Then, sickeningly, another head emerged beside his own. One wore a chilling grin. The other was frozen in terror. The second head grimaced and then was pulled back into Julius with a wet, squelching sound. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his face. "I'll try to control him." I fought the wave of nausea building in my chest. Why hadn't I quit this job when I had the chance? I could have been anywhere else in the world, doing anything but this. "You can't hurt her," Julius whispered, to himself. I assumed he was addressing Darius. I took a breath, then sat back down. "I see," I said. I'd hit my limit, like every time I reached breaking point. Something inside me just shut off. The panic turned into numbness. "So, we need to get the angry part back, right?" I asked. "Has anything like this happened before?" "No. I've never told them to leave. They usually come out in private, never in public, and never like this." "So, other people have seen them?" "Yes, but usually only one person at a time, and when I deny it, they assume they imagined it." "Right. Okay. Sure. Got it." I stared blankly ahead. "We need to find Darren," Julia said. Darren was the name of his angry part. I wanted to say, "What do you mean, we?" But instead I said, "Yes, we need to bring him back, then work on integrating your parts, not getting rid of them." Julius frowned. "But I want to get rid of them. I don't want to be sad, angry, or violent. I just want to be happy and at peace." "Nope," I said flatly. All therapist professionalism gone. Not realistic, not healthy. No one on earth lives like that. Emotions serve a purpose. Each part of you has a role. Integration is the goal, not elimination. So, you want me to keep the part that wants to kill people? I shrugged. It's scary, yes. But everyone has dark thoughts sometimes. Healthy minds have other parts that keep those urges in check. Julius seemed ready to argue. Then, his expression lit up. I know where Darren would go. He grabbed his phone and began typing. There's a rage room he likes. He goes there to smash stuff. And if someone sees two of you there, they'll assume we're twins, like you did. And what if there's three of you? Julius grinned. I frowned. He seemed a little too entertained by all this. Please help me get him back, he said softly, eyes pleading. I considered ending the session right there. I could go home, run a hot bath, maybe book a one-way ticket to anywhere else. Instead, I sighed. Fine, but I'm billing by the hour. To cut a very long story short, after a lot of back and forth, pleading, and emotional turmoil, Julius managed to bring Darren back. I honestly believed that might mark a turning point. Maybe we could finally have standard therapy sessions. Maybe I could just ignore the fact that Julius's alters could take on physical forms. By the next day, I knew I'd been wrong. Julius turned up at my office despite being scheduled for next week. He's gone, he said immediately. Who? I asked, already feeling uneasy. Darius. Of course, naturally the one to escape would be the most dangerous, the violent one. Any idea why? I asked. He said he wanted freedom. He didn't want to be integrated. He wanted to remain independent. Said he didn't want to be connected to me anymore. Julius closed his eyes. I think he intends to hurt people. So, why not start with you? I asked. Not to be rude, but out of genuine curiosity. He gave a small shrug. Maybe he thinks, if I die, he goes with me. I see. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked, any idea who he'll go after first? You. Of course. Just my luck. I didn't even do anything to him, I said, unable to keep my composure. I wasn't concerned with being professional anymore. This was out of my depth. Can I just end therapy with you and wash my hands of this? I admit, it wasn't a kind reaction, but I've dealt with enough in my life. This was too much. Julius gave a small, tired smile. I wish it were that simple. The way he said it made a chill crawl up my spine. You know something I don't. I've seen into his mind. He's planned out 47 different ways to kill you, and about as many for other people he's thought about targeting. Killing, I corrected. Killing. He agreed quietly. I'm going to the police, I said. And tell them what exactly? I hesitated. What could I possibly explain to law enforcement? If I said anything about Julius, this version would be arrested. Darius would still be out there, and I couldn't explain the rest of it. Not in any way that would make sense. I'm going overseas, I said, with conviction. Julius's eyes lit up. That could work. I have our passport. He doesn't. He can't legally leave the country. Perfect, I said. It was the first time things felt straightforward. A vacation and a solution, all in one. What country does he dislike? I asked. Just in case. Probably anywhere that doesn't have upscale hotels. I know his tastes. Got it. I'm not telling you where I'm going, though, just to be safe. I understand, Julius said, then paused. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. I'll do what I can to bring him back, so you can return. Sure, I replied, already pulling up flight bookings. I'd schedule multiple layovers to make it harder to follow me. Who knew? Maybe he'd try to take the passport. Oh wait, do me a favor. Head home now, get your passport, and lock it somewhere secure. Somewhere Darius can't find it. Julius's face reflected the same fear that just crossed my mind. Right, he said, and turned to leave. Goodbye, and I'm sorry again. It's not your fault. Not really, I told him. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've been immersed in nature, far away from home. I'd just returned yesterday. Julius had messaged. He said he found Darius and persuaded him to reintegrate. I was allowed to return, not that I was especially eager. Permanent vacation had its appeal, but I needed to work. My clients were waiting. I'd barely unpacked, tossed my laundry in, and already my thoughts were turning to what future therapy sessions with Julius might look like. Then the doorbell rang. I assumed it was my pizza, but no, of course not. It was Julius. He said he wanted to check in, said he had something important to share. Too urgent to wait for our next appointment. But I'd never given him my home address. How did he find me? And something was off. He wore a smile that didn't feel real, like it could fall apart at any moment. Naturally, I didn't open the door, but he stayed there. He stopped calling out my name. Yet when I checked through the peephole 5 minutes later, he was still standing there, smiling. I felt a surge of unease. Maybe I should call the police. I decided to give it 10 more minutes. Then the actual pizza guy arrived. Problem was, Julius was still outside. I couldn't answer the door, so I yelled to leave it at the entrance. Julius intercepted the delivery and said something to the driver, something I couldn't hear. The guy physically recoiled, like he'd just been threatened, then hurried away. Whatever was said, it rattled him. "Hey, this isn't okay," I shouted. "I'm calling the police." "Do that," Julius responded coolly, "and you'll see what happens to Kayla, to Julie, and your parents. These aren't their real names for their safety." Then he began listing their addresses. "Oh," he added, "I think Kayla's about to take Buffy for a walk." I couldn't breathe. Was he tracking them? Did he have cameras? I reached for my phone to call Kayla. "Warn them and they're dead," Julius said, smiling like he knew what I was thinking. I froze. My entire body was alert and overwhelmed. I wanted to open the door, scream at him, do something. But what if he had help? What if other parts of him were still out there? "I'm not opening the door," I called out. "If you say so," he replied, smug and taunting. I went to my bedroom and locked the door. Then the bathroom. Another lock. I had to warn my loved ones. But how? Without him catching on. How was he keeping tabs? I'd always meant to set up emergency codes with them, never followed through. Then a message from my receptionist popped up. "Hey, I gave the police your number. They'll call you soon. I'm sorry. It's bad news. Your client, Julius, was found dead in his home. His entire family, too. They think it was a murder-suicide." I felt the world drop out from beneath me. My legs gave way. I crumbled to the floor. Julius was dead. His whole family was gone. This wasn't Julius. This was Darius. I'd suspected it, but I hadn't believed it would come to this. He'd actually done it. Killed Julius and everyone close to him. My heart pounded painfully. I sat there, breath shallow. I had run away. I'd left Julius alone to face this. Now, he was gone. I hadn't killed him directly, but I'd abandoned him. I bore some of that guilt. I took a deep breath. Then I composed a message to my friends and family. "I'm in serious danger from a disturbed client. So are you. He threatened your lives. He's tracking you in real time. I'm calling the police soon. Be ready. He might send others. If you see this, get to safety. Call for help. I love you. I'll handle this and explain later. Stay safe." I held off on sending it. Not yet. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and wrapped duct tape around the handle. For grip. I'd read that people often injured themselves because their hands slipped. This would help. Then I locked myself in again. And I wrote this post because if I don't make it out of this, I want people to understand what really happened. I picked up my phone to call the police. Darius's voice echoed from the hallway. "Don't do it. Once you call, it's over. I'll kill you and everyone you care about." For a moment, I hoped a neighbor might hear him. Then I remembered. They're out of the country. Okay, I've sent the message. I'm calling the police now. Wish me luck. I found a door deep inside a submerged cave. Something knocked from the other side. People say cave diving is like drifting through space. Weightless, silent, dark. I disagree. Space has stars. Down here, it's just stone and pressure. You don't float, you crawl. You breathe slow and steady. You hope your line holds. I'd been diving nearly an hour when I came across it. A narrow slit in the rock, just wide enough to squeeze through. It wasn't marked on any chart. My instincts told me to steer clear, but curiosity often overrides reason. I pushed through, scraping my tank along the walls until the passage opened into a chamber. Not just any chamber, a perfect sphere. The walls were smooth, almost polished. The water felt denser, colder. It didn't feel natural. It felt cleared out. At the center stood a door. Just a door. Upright. No frame. No hinges. No wall to attach it to. It had no business being there. I drifted closer, shining my light across its surface. The wood was dark, aged but untouched. No decay. No growth. It didn't even shift with the current. It looked dry. I circled it twice, checking behind. Nothing but solid rock. I don't know how long I stared. Every instinct said to leave. I turned to go. Then I heard it. Knock. Knock. 2 sharp knocks, loud enough to echo inside my helmet. I spun, heart racing. The door hadn't moved. Then came a voice, muffled by the water but unmistakably human. Hello. Close. Far too close. Another knock. Then a second voice. Quieter. Female. Please, let us out. I twisted in place, scanning with my light. No, one. Just the door. A third voice followed as if right behind me. It's cold. We can't breathe. Then another. You left us here. I froze. This wasn't narcosis. I know those symptoms. This was real. I grabbed the guideline and started heading back. Slowly at first, then faster, as the voices drew nearer. Then the tone shifted. They stopped pleading and began accusing. Coward. You always run. There's no surface anymore. You belong with us. I fumbled along the line, confused. My light flickered. Something brushed my leg. I turned. Nothing. I should have kept going. I should have blocked them out. But something in me, a voice that sounded like mine, whispered, just open it. See what happens. I turned around. The door was still there. I reached out, took the handle. It felt warm, almost alive under my glove. I opened it. Behind the door was nothing. No darkness, no water, no stone. Just emptiness. No up, no down. Like staring into the mouth of something ancient and waiting. A blast of freezing air hit me. My mask fogged. My body seized with cold. My helmet light died. And then I heard them. Running. Bare feet. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Slapping against a stone. All around me. Yet I saw no one. Something touched my shoulder. Fingers, maybe. Or claws. The chamber shook. Cracks spread like veins along the walls. Pebbles rained down, clattering off my tank. I panicked. I grabbed the line and swam, desperate. The cavern collapsed behind me, boulders crashing down, sending waves that shoved me forward. I surfaced with seconds of air left, coughing, trembling, barely able to climb aboard the boat. That was 3 months ago. I haven't dived since. I can barely sleep. Every night I hear knocking, sometimes at the door. sometimes at the windows, sometimes inside the house. They don't bleed anymore. They don't ask to be let out. They're already here, waiting. There's a possible time or reality glitch at a gas station in Georgia. Last Thursday, I was on my usual late-night drive, something I've done regularly for a few years. I often take the rural roads that cut through farmland and forest. The quiet atmosphere, interrupted only occasionally by another car, helped me relax. Nothing unusual had ever happened until that night. I was heading northeast on GA 121 when the radio turned to static. Moments later, I noticed lights in the distance. As I got closer, I realized it was a gas station with a convenience store. I was hungry, so I pulled into the lot. Stepping out, the only sound I heard was crickets, more than usual for the area. I walked inside and headed toward the chips. That's when I noticed the packaging looked strange. The Lay's logo was blocky, with white letters on a red square and odd lines around it. I figured it must be a new design and picked up a bag. The price was surprisingly low, cheap enough to pay with just coins. At the counter, I saw an unusually large cash register. The cashier, an elderly man with the white hair, raised an eyebrow and asked, "Are you from around here?" "Yes," I replied. He didn't say anything else, just took the coins, bagged the chips, and handed them over. Curious, I glanced at other product logos. They all looked vintage. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Back in my car, I ate a few chips and got back on the road. The radio remained static until a pop station finally came through. When I got home, I posted the photo and described the experience on Instagram. Someone asked where the gas station was. I tried to locate it on Google Maps but couldn't find anything. I then shared the story on RR Glitch in The Matrix. An hour later, a user asked what the receipt's date was. I checked. It should have said April 17, 2025. Instead, it read March 15th, 1965. When I updated the post, some suggested I had slipped into the past, or into a version of the past. Hoped there was a simpler explanation. That night I retraced my route, searching for the store. I didn't find it, but I did spot a receipt being carried across the road by the wind. I stopped and leaned in to examine it. It was covered in strange symbols I couldn't recognize. Sunday night I went out again. Driving along GA 121, I joked to myself that I might find the station again. Within minutes, the radio went to static. Lights appeared ahead. There it was, the same gas station. But now it had more pumps, and the convenience store looked updated, with extra posters in the windows. The parking lot was freshly paved in black. Inside, the aisles were rearranged. The cashier this time was a young blonde woman. The register was small and modern, with a glowing LED screen. She walked into a back room, so I pulled out my phone and started recording. I got footage of the candy and snack logos, some familiar, some not. Music played softly from ceiling speakers. I bought a couple of Mars bars, paying in coins just in case. Overall, the store felt current, aside from the unusual branding and the high-tech register. Outside, I noticed extra lights in the distance that didn't belong. I sat in the car, ready to leave. As I looked down at the bag of candy, the store's lights suddenly went out. I looked up. Total darkness. It was like the gas station had never existed. The radio DJs were back. I switched on my interior light and looked at the receipt. April 3rd, 2038. My stomach dropped. I planned to return the next night. On Monday night, I drove the same route again. The radio turned to static. I saw the lights and pulled in. Inside the store, the layout had changed again. The cashier stood to the left. No register, just a floating screen where one should have been. None of the brands had names I recognized. I took another photo and stepped outside. In the distance, towering skyscrapers stretched across the horizon, endless. As I stared, a shriek echoed through the air. It sounded almost human, but not quite. I turned and saw a dark silhouette moving toward me. My heart sank. The figure paused, then lunged. I ran to the car and dove inside. As I slammed the door, a loud thud hit the vehicle. Then another. I peeked over the dashboard and started the engine. Just as I backed away, the figure struck the headlight. It had a gray body and a round black shell. I couldn't get a clear look. It was too fast. I hit the gas. As I drove, I saw flashing red and blue lights behind me in the mirror. But ahead of me, the familiar rural landscape had been replaced by rows of identical two-story suburban houses. This wasn't GA1 or 21 anymore. Then something slammed into the passenger window. The glass cracked under the impact. I glanced over. A shapeless mass was pressed against the window. I tried to shake it off, but couldn't. The dread in my stomach deepened. Eventually, it was gone. I sighed in relief and focused on the road. The houses had vanished, replaced once again by trees. The DJs were back on the radio. I made it home, still trying to understand what had just happened. It made me think. Maybe some of those time-slip stories are real. Not all, but some. I wonder if there are people who never make it back, who get stuck or worse. In my driveway, I looked for the bag of candy. I checked every seat, every corner, but it was gone. I figured I must have dropped it when I panicked. The next morning, I checked at the car. The headlight was shattered. So was the passenger window. A strange gray, sticky substance coated the glass, clinging to the edges and seeping into the cracks. I scraped some into a jar, questioning whether I was even in the same reality, or the same year. Earlier today, I told my coworker Kyle about what happened. His eyes widened as I shared every detail. When I finished, he said, "That's wild. I need to see that gas station man." "You might get hurt," I warned him. He shrugged. "Whatever. Life's boring. I want to experience another reality. Everyone hears about this stuff. I want to see it." I gave him directions. After all, nothing bad had happened to me the first 2 times. Maybe the third was a one-off. Still, I had no desire to go back. Just now, I got a message from a friend. Someone who also knew Kyle. Kyle killed himself. I don't know how to process it. He said something about a gas station and creatures. The only words I caught were started and year. I can't believe it. We were just hanging out yesterday. I don't understand. Do you know anything about him going to a gas station? They call it the House of Graves. The house was new to me, but old in every other sense. In the area we moved to, old meant affordable. And as someone who had left home young and was still broke as an adult, affordable was barely within reach. I was lucky my friends helped me with the move. When I walked out of my parents' place for the last time, all I carried was what could fit in a backpack. The clothes I wore and the cash I'd saved, working grueling hours at the same factory where my dad had spent 3 decades. He would have noticed if I'd taken anything else. Being discreet was the only reason I got out unscathed. Or worse, then again, maybe nothing's worse than Hallaton, that dry, forgotten town. Hallaton was isolated, far from family, far from almost everything. It was just under an hour south toward Santa Fe, where I'd enrolled in community college. Even though it was rural, it felt like a strange kind of oasis after all the endless roads we drove, packed to the brim. I didn't own much, never had. Rebecca, Martin, and Raoul helped me haul everything from my run-down apartment into Raoul's truck. Right before we moved, the four of us were lounging on the floor of my last place, eating cheap Chinese and watching a movie, when Raoul said something that stuck. "We gotta get out of Oklahoma." That's all it took. The homes along Harrow Hill Road were spaced out like you'd expect in an old town. I'd been to places like this back in Oklahoma, usually half hidden in the woods. By the time we pulled up, it was after 10 p.m. The house seemed enormous in the dark. Its windows were darker than the sky, and even outside you could hear the soft creaks of the old frame settling, like some lonely widow perched on a hill, groaning as the world moved too quickly around her. A two-bedroom with a finished attic was somehow the cheapest option available. Eventually, I'd understand why. "Warner," Rebecca called down to me from the stairs not 5 minutes after we started bringing in boxes. "You're sure you're okay with the loft? I mean, Martin and I taking it makes sense, but with the baby on the way and the stairs, plus the morning sickness, and there's barely room for your easel and paints." "I'll put that stuff in the basement," I replied without hesitation. "It's not even finished," she pointed out. "Would you rather me get oil paint on carpet, tile, or hardwood?" She paused, thinking. "Okay, fair point. Rare, I know. That's actually really thoughtful of you, by the way, giving us the master bedroom. You're technically almost 3 people in one room. You'll need the bathroom. The math checks out. It took maybe 3 or 4 hours to get everything inside. Once we hauled in our mattresses, none of us had the energy to do more than toss down blankets and pillows. We scraped together some cash and played nose-goes. Martin lost and had to make the beer and pizza run. He kissed Becca before heading out into the freezing cold, bundled in that ugly gray scarf of his. Rebecca and Martin had been together for nearly a decade, but were only legally married for 2. High school sweethearts, now 21 and 20, respectively. I'd known them since grade school. We were the kind of casual friends you only talked to at recess. We reconnected working the same restaurant job years later. "I think Monica's into me," Raoul said as he grabbed a glass of water in the kitchen. Somehow he'd already unpacked the basics. "I know it's long distance, but I really think we could make it work. I'll be making enough at this new job to cover flights back and forth." I met Raoul in high school. He once punched a guy in the stomach at a concert after that guy broke my nose for spilling his beer. There's nothing like dragging each other to the hospital at midnight to seal a brotherhood. I don't think we would have learned more about each other if we'd gotten blackout drunk together behind a gas station. "And you're assuming she's into you because..." Becca raised an eyebrow as he returned with glasses for us. She kept rubbing my shoulder during our shift, and I caught her checking out my chest once or twice. Sounds like a perfect foundation for commitment. Hey, Monica's not into labels, and I think I'm fine with that. After what Daisy did, I'm done looking for love. I just want something casual. Becca clearly didn't agree, but she didn't argue. I'd always been single, didn't even have a vague middle school crush story. Once, a girl in my calci class gave me one of those silicone bracelets, and I got butterflies. Then I found out she'd been high and made them for half the class. That's teenage life for you. I didn't mind, though. I kept the focus on school and work. I was studying engineering and transferring credits to my new college. Before moving, I was still working with Becca and Martin at that restaurant. Decent gig, but not long-term. My grades started to slip from all-nighters, and even painting, my only real hobby, was getting pushed aside. Not that I was particularly talented. Friends said nice things, but I never submitted a portfolio or went to art shows. Painting was just for me, my own space, something no one could take, and even after everything that's happened, I still enjoy it. Martin came back with greasy pizza and a six-pack, like some knight in slightly wrinkled armor. I was starving and ready to pass out. Rebecca had her sparkling water, and after a few slices and beers, I was beyond done for the night. So were they, but for different reasons. Keep the love noises down when Warner and I are home. Lovebirds, Raoul groaned, pushing himself off the floor with a series of back cracks. Weed. Sound the same getting up. I'm crashing hard. Thank God I don't start until Monday. Same here, Martin and Becca echoed. I wasn't as lucky. I was used to juggling work and class anyway. The transfer was rough. Some scholarship money came through, but I still owed half the tuition. Tomorrow I'd be scouring Hallaton for a part-time job that fit around my schedule. I collapsed onto my mattress, already dreading the early morning paperwork and registration at Santa Fe Community College. Luckily, I found a job right away at the Gas and Get, a convenience store and gas station on the edge of town. The overnight shift was ideal. I could hit classes during the day and be home in time for work. Even on my first shift, the job was pretty straightforward. My boss Frank was easygoing, and the register was practically self-service. That weekend, we got our first knock at the door. The man looked to be in his 50s or 60s. Based on the gray streaks in his hair and beard, he wore a flannel shirt under a puffer vest and faded canvas pants. One of those timeless outfits that made age hard to guess. I gave him a polite, tight-lipped smile. Midwest reflex. Name's Daniel Spritcher. You're the new folks. I met Mr. Perez before, but not you. He meant Raoul. He extended a hand, and I shook it. I'm your landlord. He chuckled like it should have been obvious, since Raoul had handled most of the arrangements. Working remote gave him the flexibility. The rest of us had only needed to sign the lease. He found the house cheap, and the rest fell into place. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Warner, I replied. Is there something I can help with, or are you just dropping by? My wife and I live just down the road, maybe 2 football fields that way. He pointed east. You're welcome to swing by on the weekends if we're out back. Just built a new fire pit. Makes for great s'mores. Appreciate the invite, sir. We saw y'all moving in. My wife, Wanda, and I were just curious. He scratched at his neck, already red and irritated. I tried not to look. Young people move in here. It makes us wonder. You don't have to answer, and I won't judge either way, but are you running from something? Trouble with the law? God, no. I quickly shook my head. Just looking for a fresh start, that's all. You're not the first I've heard that from, but hardly anyone picks this town for it. I should have guessed when I listed the place. After the last tenants moved out, Figured I'd give the internet a try. Sorry if this is weird, but the more we talk, he scratched again, this time more urgently. You look familiar. Have you been here before? No, sir, I said, caught slightly off guard. This is actually my first time here. Right. I remember Raoul saying something like that. You sure you've never been nearby before? I used to substitute at a high school in Pecos. No, we've always lived on the western edge of Oklahoma. I just started working the overnight shift at the Gas and Get. Maybe you saw me, although if he had, I figured I'd have remembered. Graveyard shift. No, I was definitely asleep by then. Well, good meeting you. You're all still welcome to swing by for a beer and some company sometime. Maybe even grab a pizza from Andretti's over on Wren Street. You're of age, right? Been legal for a couple of years, I said with a laugh. Great. Beer and pizza's hard to beat. It struck me how spot on that was. Our exact move-in night meal. Maybe it's easy to guess what people in their 20s eat when they're settling in somewhere new. Well, take care. He pulled his collar up and headed off into the wind as the sun dipped lower. Weeks passed, and I had settled into the rhythm of the overnight shift. After work, I went to my one morning class and made it back home by 11 a.m. Ever get the odd feeling that someone else is home even when everything's silent? It made me wonder if that comes from some primitive part of our brain. A holdover from a time when we had to be alert to predators. That sensation of being watched. Only my car was outside. I was the only one home. I shook it off and tried to nap on the couch. Maybe I was just adjusting to being in a house again after 5 years in cramped apartments. I scrolled on my phone for a while and then put on a podcast to help me sleep. Can't fall asleep without some background noise. As I was drifting off, I heard what sounded like loud footsteps upstairs, but I was too far gone to fully wake up. Someone must have come home. Maybe one of the 3 walked or got dropped off. Whoever it was stomped around for a while. Upstairs, then downstairs, then back up again. The banging was so loud I thought they were dragging furniture. Finally, I sat up, irritated. Who the hell is up there? I called. No response. I assumed it was Raoul. He'd left earlier with his backpack, probably working remotely somewhere, like he usually did. I'd even caught the lingering scent of his expensive cologne. There weren't many options in town for remote work. A library, a couple of coffee shops, and a few restaurants. Rebecca and Martin had just started at Ermeline's, the local favorite. Just as I got to the stairs, Raoul came down in a rush. Hey man, I started. He blew right past me without a word and slammed the front door behind him. Odd thing was, he didn't seem to be carrying anything, despite all the commotion upstairs. No bag, no boxes, nothing. Why come back at all if not to get something? I didn't check to see if his car was outside. If he'd bothered to dock, I might have offered him a ride back into town. Instead, I lay back down, annoyed, but somehow I still managed to fall asleep. Later I woke to the sound of Martin and Rebecca coming home, laughing as they shook off the cold. They looked a little sheepish when they saw I'd been napping. Hey guys, I mumbled. Hey, you, sleep okay? Martin asked, always the wellness guy. 6 hours, only had 1 class today, I replied. It was 5 p.m., but the winter sky was already pitch black. How was work? Same as always, Martin said flatly. Can't wait to open a practice of my own. He was training in holistic chiropractic care. A bit new age, but at least He wasn't preachy. But we're meeting a lot of people, Rebecca said, more upbeat. And the tips are great at the busiest place in town. We brought baked ziti home. Hungry. Of course I was. We were almost done eating when Raoul came in. I remembered how he'd brushed past me earlier, with no explanation. As he entered the room, I set my fork down a little harder than intended. It got his attention. "Hey," I said, clearly frustrated. "What was that earlier? You stormed around, didn't say a word, then left. Are you mad or something?" He looked confused. "What are you talking about?" "Earlier. You came back, stomped around upstairs, made a ton of noise, and left without saying anything." "Whoa." Martin raised a hand to calm me down. "Warner, I think you're mistaken." Because I saw him." "Dude," Raoul said slowly, "I've been gone all day." I blinked. "No way. I saw you." "He's been at the restaurant with us," Rebecca added, "the whole time." I tried to reconcile what they were saying with what I'd experienced. I had seen Raoul. I'd smelled his cologne. I even felt him brush past me. But I had been half asleep, maybe dreaming. "Have you been upstairs?" Raoul asked. "No," I admitted. "Went back to sleep." Well, if I'd been tossing stuff around like that, something should be out of place. Let's check it out. We started upstairs. Bathroom, fine. Master bedroom, untouched. Raoul's room, exactly as it was last night. "See," he said, a bit defensive. "Can we drop this now? It's freaking me out." I rubbed my neck, my head spinning. Yeah, maybe I was just dreaming. "Sleepwalking," Martin suggested. "Your sleep schedule's been all over the place lately." "Maybe. But just to be sure, let's check my room." Raoul frowned. "You think I'd mess with your stuff?" As a joke. I was already moving. My heart was racing, not from the sprint, but from something else. "Whoa," Raoul said as he caught up. Martin followed, peering over his shoulder. "Okay, no way. I didn't do this." My room was a mess. Bedding everywhere, pillows tossed aside, drawers pulled out, clothes scattered. Even the curtain rod was off the wall. "Raoul," I shouted, furious. I tried to rehang the curtain rod but dropped it in frustration. "Why the hell would you do this?" "I didn't." His eyes were wide. "I swear I wasn't even home." Martin stepped between us, trying to prevent a fight. Dad instincts kicking in early. "Let's take a breath. Either someone came inside, or Warner, you might have done this in your sleep." "No way." I woke up exactly how I fell asleep, phone in hand, earbuds in. Rebecca's voice came from downstairs. "But why was the door unlocked?" "They probably used the spare key," Raoul sighed. "It's under the mat. We should move it. I just didn't think it'd be a problem. Here, should we report it? There's not much the cops can do," Martin said, while I started putting things back. "I'll grab a video doorbell tomorrow. Won't help tonight, but we'll bring the key inside, check all the locks, and take it from there." "Oh my God," Rebecca called out. "I can't believe this is happening. We just moved in." "No one took anything," I said. "All my valuables are still here. Maybe it was sleepwalking, or something else. We'll get the camera. Might have been some local kids messing around. I'll mention it to the landlord." "You've met him?" Raoul asked as Martin went to calm Rebecca. "Yeah, a few days ago. Lives about 5 minutes away. Seems decent." "Definitely worth bringing up," Raoul muttered. "Warner, I'm really sorry. I'd never do this to you." "It's fine," I said. running a hand through my hair. "Let's just lock up. You guys get some rest. I've got work tonight." "Tell Barb I said hi." Martin grinned. I'd already told enough stories about our regular at Gas End, get to fill a book, and I'd only worked there a month. That night at the gas station went by as usual. I'd actually come to enjoy working the graveyard shift. The pay was surprisingly decent for what the job was, and there was something almost peaceful about restocking shelves to the steady hum of coolers, interrupted only by the occasional trucker making a quick stop for snacks or a bathroom break. If it weren't for my commitment to finishing school, I might have liked being a trucker myself. Cohan, one of our regulars, rolled in around 2 most nights in his 18-wheeler. He always cleaned out the corn nuts display. I hated the smell of those things, but he swore they paired well with his cigarettes, which he also grabbed, 2 packs each visit. He was a big guy and quiet, the kind of person who carried a gun, but in a way that made you feel safer, not uneasy. Definitely the kind of man who'd shield you before pulling it. I was restocking the corn nuts he'd wiped out when Barb came in. Sometimes I suspected she waited in her car for the place to clear out before coming inside. "Hey there, Warner," she greeted me in that husky country drawl of hers. "Evening, Barb. How's the road treating you?" Being up in the mountains, winter nights could get as bone-chilling as any in the Midwest. "If I had any balls, they'd have frozen off by now," she said. "These new trucks don't hold heat like they should, but skies look clear through the weekend, according to both of the forecast and my cards. Not like it's snowed much around here in years anyway." She was usually right. Her tarot readings tended to be more accurate than any psychic I'd ever heard of, at least when it came to the past, present, and future. Barb was just flat out cool. Jet black bobbed hair, which I suspected was a wig, pale skin, and a wardrobe that looked like it had been pulled straight from a stoner's van in the 70s. Hemp and rope necklaces with crystals, dreamcatcher earrings and rings covering her fingers. She looked like she'd time-traveled straight from a Grateful Dead concert. Covered in tattoos, despite being old enough to be my grandmother. Frankly, I kinda wished she was. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, but she could put away more Red Bull in a night than I could. She'd already grabbed a few cans and a pack of snack cakes by the time she joined me at the register. Our usual chat carried on until she said something odd. "You smell off." I cringed, suddenly wondering if I should have showered before work. Maybe I'd worked up a sweat I hadn't noticed. Still, her choice of words made me pause. "Off," I repeated. "How do you mean?" "Something's different," she said, not elaborating. "Something new happened." It wasn't a question. That was what made it unsettling. I licked my lower lip, thinking. Honestly, nothing new. Just the usual. Class, work, home, same cycle. Something happened today. I laughed, brushing it off. I was used to her quirks. She once loaned me a real rabbit's foot, sealed in a plastic baggie for luck on a test. I passed, but mostly because I'd studied hard. When I returned it, she cleansed it with salt and tucked it back in a cloth pouch. But then, I remembered. Actually, yeah, something did happen today. I told her everything. About the strange event in the house. How it left me feeling like I was losing my mind not long after waking up. I'd been trying all night to push it aside and focus on work. That part was easy for me. Clearing my head came naturally. Maybe too naturally, honestly. "Ever sleepwalk before?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not that I know of." She made a low sound, lips pressed together. That's not great. Could be sleepwalking, but probably not. Not if you've never done it before. Mind if I read the cards? You carry those with you all the time. I raised an eyebrow as she pulled them from her purse. They work better when they soak up my energy. Okay, that tracked in Barb logic. She stuck a cigarette between her lips and rummaged around for her tarot deck. By the time she found it, her lipstick had smudged both the cigarette and her chin. There we go. Let me shuffle them. She dropped the deck on the counter and shuffled with the grace of a seasoned dealer. Tarot always reminded me of gambling. Draw a few cards, hope for the best, and pray the message matched your needs. She had me pick 3 from a stack of 10, laid them out, and turned them face up. The only one I recognized was the tower. Store. Other 2 were too faded to make out at first glance. Barb tapped the tower with her knuckle. Reversed means things are off. Trouble coming. Bad energy in the air. Next, 5 of swords. That one's about someone using any means to get ahead. Bad intentions. And finally, the hanged man. That one doesn't sound promising, I said through my teeth. Sacrifice, she replied. Letting go of what you want, sometimes even yourself, for change. Missteps, painful revelations. I pulled these for clarity, but now it's your turn to interpret. You might see something I don't. That was Barb's real skill, getting even skeptics to consider for just a moment that maybe she was right. I didn't label myself one way or another, but if anyone could sway me, it was her. Bad motives, I don't know. Trouble, maybe balancing school and work. Bit surface level, Barb muttered. Ouch. I gave it another shot. Whatever happened today, it might happen again. Or it might be the start of something bigger. I should ask Mr. Spritcher about it tomorrow. Spritcher, she echoed. Why him? Our landlord, I said. Oh, hell. She closed her eyes and bit her cigarette. Should have figured. Too many rentals popping up as the younger crowd heads to the city. Is it that house on Arrow Hill? Yeah. Figures. That little rat Spritcher bought that property 6, maybe 7 years ago. Been renting it out ever since. Is that unusual? No one stays long. Before he even bought it, that place had a reputation. Ask anyone over 50 in this town. They'll tell you. A reputation. Everyone who's lived there either leaves, dies there, or vanishes entirely. That house has a name, Warner, and it's not a good one. I swallowed hard. What name? They call it the House of Graves. I stayed awake that morning. No classes, just hours of lying there thinking. Thinking about Spritcher, Barb, the house, and Raoul. That whole bizarre incident from the afternoon. I couldn't fault Spritcher for not bringing up the house's past. Who'd want to rent a place with a history like that? And Barb. She was almost always right, as strange as she could be. Then there was Raoul, and what had happened. I replayed it in my mind again and again, trying to make sense of it. I curled up, face in my hands, digging for some thread of memory to pull everything together. Just one clue. Then it hit me. Somewhere between that light sleep earlier and now, I saw it. Clear as anything. As if someone had been standing in front of me, speaking right in my ear. Like a memory I didn't realize I'd lost until it resurfaced. Clean, vivid, real. It had been Raoul, but he didn't have a face.